It's an absolute pleasure welcoming Dr. Kerim Balci for our final session of the Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies 2020-21. Dr. Kerim Balci will be speaking on need for dialogue in the face of global challenges. You're all aware of him, but for the record, let me introduce him once again. Dr. Kerim Balci is a writer, journalist, academic, and human rights activist of Turkish origin. He's recently the chief advisor of London-based Human Rights Solidarity and works as a communication officer at London Advocacy, a litigation-based human rights advocacy firm. He has served as the editor-in-chief of Turkish Review and as a columnist at today's Zaman and Zaman dailies before publications were shuttered by the Turkish government. Dr. Balji studied his Sorry, there's some noise in the background. Could you all turn off your microphone? Apologies for that. Dr. Balji studied his BA in Physics and Political Science at Bogazici University, Turkey, his MA in Islam and Modern Middle East at the Hebrew University, Jerusalem, and his PhD on linguistics at Durham University, UK. He is currently an LLM student at Leeds Law School, UK. You're welcome, Dr. Balji. You have up to 3 hours for this session and you can conduct it however you like to. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, friends. Today I'm going to speak about the need to collaborate on the face of new challenges that we are all exposed as the humanity. But of course, I'm going to look at the issue from the perspective of religious traditions, be them the established religions of the Middle East or religions of Southeast Asia, where religious philosophy and religion is mixed together. Some kind of meta-religious thoughts like Hinduism has evolved in time. My overall thesis of this presentation is going to be this particular point. On the face of the new challenges that the humanity is facing, no particular religious tradition or ideological tradition is equipped well enough to cope with those problems. We need the insight of the other traditions in order to cope with the emerging problems of the 21st century. I have to make a few initial remarks. First of all, I'm not an expert on the issues that I'm going to raise as the challenges. I will be speaking about the global climate crisis. I'm going to speak about the introduction of artificial intelligence and ethical issues involved. I'm going to speak about big data and the new data economy. I'm going to speak about genome editing and how edited DNAs are going to change the classical understanding of free will from the perspective of religions. I'm going to speak about transhumanism and possible space colonies. And lastly, but not leastly, I'm going to speak about the rise of right and left-wing populism in politics all around the world. Well, apart from populism, the other issues are not normally in the area where I have been doing my journalism. I did read a lot about artificial intelligence. Of course, as every human being, I am interested in big data, or I am actually a victim of big data, and genome editing has been introduced into our daily agendas already 2 years ago, when in China, a doctor declared that he had played with the DNAs of 2 children because the parents didn't want them to have HIV virus in their DNA bodies. Well, um, as I said, I'm not an expert on these issues. I'm going to base my discussion on the expertise of other people. So this presentation is by no means a presentation about the challenges that artificial intelligence or other issues that I'm going to raise poses to humanity. I'm going to deal with our weaknesses, not the greatness of the challenge, because that is a totally different topic and usually a technical issue. I have to say also that nobody is well equipped enough to speak about all those issues because these are largely uncharted territories. These are when we start speaking about artificial intelligence or big data uh, or transhumanism particularly, we are speaking about a future. We don't know how remote or close it is, but it is certainly a future that we only estimate. We guess about what will happen, but we are not 100% sure that those issues are going to happen. We don't know 100% with precise knowledge that the future of artificial intelligence will come to a point where we will have robots that claim a kind of belief. No? In my humble understanding, they will. Any kind of consciousness that is produced on this world will eventually reach to a point of declaring their belief in one or several gods, but certainly some kind of belief is going to emerge from artificial intelligence. Obviously, and already, many people have converted into some kind of post modern religions that relate to artificial intelligence. You might find people here and there, particularly in Western world, who have already started to worship gods of artificial intelligence. But I'm speaking about something totally different. Will we ever have robots who dream? Will we ever have robots who love and eventually who believe in a supernatural being? And if it will happen, then almost all of religious traditions of this world will be challenged with that fact. So some of those issues are uncharted territories. I'm going to speak about a possible fishman. If we start playing with DNAs of human beings, and if global climate crisis is correct by means of what it says, then we are going to have a larger share of the surface of our Earth covered with waters. So a creative solution is to rebuild Atlantis, the undersea cities. But of course, we will first have to play with DNAs of future generations so that they can live underwater. But if human beings start living underwater, it is going to pose a real challenge to several of our uh, religions in this world. I'm going to come to those issues. As I said, these are largely futuristic issues, and some of those issues, when I start speaking about it, I do realize that many people think I'm speaking about a hugely, remote future or a fantastic or a dystopian future where robots or artificial intelligence are going to control the life. We are going to be enslaved by them. No, I'm not speaking about such a remote and impossible future. I'm speaking about almost tomorrow. So these are real challenges that we have to start speaking about. Uh, as I said, the overall thesis of my presentation is that no particular religion, including Islam, Christianity, or whatever religion you believe, is well equipped enough to deal with the challenges of 21st century. We can, of course, ask the same question about the challenges of the 20th century. We have had the two global world wars, and we can ask the question whether our religions were well equipped to deal with the catastrophes of the First and Second World War, and most probably our answers will be negative. So in that sense, I'm not claiming that this is something totally new, but the issues that I'm going to discuss are totally new, that people of faith has to come to start thinking about. Many religions, including Hinduism, and to a certain extent from among the Abrahamic religions, Judaism believes that they are the oldest religions in the world. Let me start by saying that every religion is as young as the challenges it is exposed to. So whenever a religious tradition is exposed to a new tradition, it has to respond, yes, from within its tradition, but also from within the actual realities of that day. So if we are speaking about global climate crisis, and if a religious tradition is and eventually all our religious traditions will be challenged by that fact, if Hindus or Buddhists or Sikhs or Muslims feel themselves in a position to say or do something about that religiously from within their own religious traditions, that means your religion is as young as a few years, because the global climate crisis is something totally new under the sun. Every religion is as young as the challenges they are exposed to. This doesn't mean they are not old. They are as old as their historical existence also, but this underlines that our religious traditions are dynamic. We do not believe in, I'm a Muslim, but to claim that my religion was frozen back in the time of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and it didn't evolve or developed into something else in the history is naivety. This is totally against human creativity. Whenever we read the holy texts of a religious tradition, we engage into some kind of dialogue with the creator or the supranational being, whatever you believe as the revealer of that holy text, and that dialogue actually reproduces the religious tradition here and now. So even in Islamic tradition, there is a saying attributed to the Prophet, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, advised his followers to read and listen to the Quran as if it is being revealed to them within their historical context, historical realities, not to Muhammad, peace be upon him, 1500 years ago, but now and here to Kerim Balci within my own historical realities. This is the dynamic side of religion. This, of course, gives us extreme responsibility. When we are speaking about our religious traditions, we have seen how radicals took their religious traditions out of their authenticity frames, because they said, this is our historical reality now. When we read the text now and here, we do understand this because of our contextual realities. This was particularly an issue I touched when I presented you several months ago about Bakhtin and Bakhtin's understanding of dialogue that is around the text, but that involves both the author and the reader. I'm not going to enter into that topic in depth today because I have enough challenges to deal with. Let me pose a question. Why does religious people Why do religious people do not normally collaborate? Why do our religions are largely exclusivist when it comes to other religions? Well, of course, I have a little knowledge of Hinduism, which is not a religion but a meta-religion that actually categorizes other religions and gives certain level of legitimacy to all the religions. This puts Hinduism into a position of a kind of religious philosophy, not a religion per se, but largely all other religions on the earth, be them philosophical religions or even secularism. Religious traditions are all exclusivist. They claim monopoly to truth. The absolute truth belongs to me and to my religious tradition only, or to my ideological camp only. And they also claim monopoly to solutions. This distinction is very important. It is not that we do claim monopoly to truth only that makes us exclusivist against other religious traditions. It's not that Muslims believe they have the absolute and the most perfected revelation of Islam, or of the revelation from one God, Allah. It's not only that; it is always there. But they also believe, and I do believe, that my tradition has the monopoly to solutions. Meaning, every religion actually tries to bring some kind of order to human nature and to the world that we are living in. This is not to claim that we are in a continuous state of disorder and we do try to give an order to the world. No, there is an amazing order in the universe, but by means of our perceptions, we do need the reordering authority of our religious traditions. In anyhow, almost all religious traditions promise two things to human beings: happiness in the hereafter, or some kind of spiritual happiness, and happiness in this world. If there is a religious tradition that has a reincarnation element in it, not an element of resurrection in another world, then it refers, the spiritual happiness refers to a spiritual happiness in another world. So in several Asian traditions, reincarnation, and in Kabbalistic traditions among the Jewish religion, reincarnation is a part of the faith, and people believe that what you do is going to decide what you will be in the next life. In authentic Abrahamic religions, the next life is literally a next life. It is the hereafter that we go and never turn back. But in anyhow, there is this life and another life, be it a reincarnated another chance in this world, or resurrected life in the hereafter that will continue forever. There is this world and another world. There is this life and the next life, and religions give order to both of them. There is no single religion in the world that says, I'm here to rearrange your life so as to change where you are going in the next life. I have nothing to say about this life. I'm not going to reorganize your life. I'm not going to give you laws on how you are going to manage your family affairs, sexual relations, and so on. There's no such religion. That is precisely why we call a religion religion. It does actually promise happiness in this world. And of course, it imposes on us certain norms about how we engage with others, with ourselves, our bodies, and so on. And that is the monopoly to solutions, because it doesn't say only about the other world. It also speaks about this world, and this world has a lot of problems. So it produces, every religion offers us solutions. And in fact, religious traditions are exclusivist in that they also believe that they have the solution to the problems of the world. You know, Christian missionaries believe that all of your problems, psychological or even financial problems, will be solved if you believe in Christ. Muslims believe that all of your problems will be solved. In fact, you will start believing that they were not even problems if you believe in Muhammad and the message of Islam. In this world, it's not going to make you happy only in the paradise, it will make you happy in this world also. So there is a belief in the monopoly of solutions. We don't need other input from other religions in order to solve our problems. Every religious tradition says that. Well, the issue is, theologically speaking, if we do away with, if you evade, if you just, negate one of these monopolies, the negation of monopoly of truth actually negates the religion itself. So if, as a Muslim, for example, I come out and I say, well, from now on, I don't believe that Islam holds the truth or the absolute truth, I'm no longer a Muslim. But if I come out and say, I'm truly a believer in Islam, but I do realize that I cannot solve all the problems of humanity only from within my religious tradition, that doesn't harm my religious faith. So monopoly to truth cannot be denied, but monopoly to solutions can be, and that is precisely what I'm going to do today. I'm going to deny that any religion or any ideology in this world is well equipped, and by definition should not have been well equipped enough to deal with the challenges that we are exposed to. Now I'm going to pass to the uniqueness of the new challenges. Just a reminder, I told you I'm not an expert on either one of those issues. Maybe on political populism, I can speak a bit more. I'm going to depend on the expertise of other people. I'm going to refer to several experts also if need be. One particular issue I'm going to speak about is the global climate crisis, not only because it is one of the largest challenges that the 21st century generations have to cope with, and because it is going to radically change our lives, maybe mobilizing more than 250 million people from the cities that they are right now living, because their cities are going to be left underwater within the 50 years to come. It's not only that reason, but also because the global climate crisis is going to bring in challenges to the very religious traditions of our lives. First of all, there is this extinction of species issue. Now, scientists suggest that we are almost done with all our time. If humanity does not do anything, within 9 years of time, 1 million extra species are going to be extinct from this world. Well, the number is huge, and that actually corresponds to almost 1/4 of life science on this earth. So think of it that 1/4 of your body does not exist anymore. That is precisely what is going to be happening within the next generation to our nature in this world. They say so. And in fact, still they also say that, we are late, but not too late. Particularly the lessons of the COVID-19 has taught us that if we can depopularize certain places, if we can have less human intervention, nature is actually recovering. I was listening only 2 days ago on the occasion of the World Wildlife Day. A United Nations expert told us how in certain African nature preservation places, several life forms, particularly wild animals, recovered from decades of almost extinction just because tourists didn't arrive this last 2 years. So thanks to COVID-19, some of the animals which were almost extinct managed to recover from extinction, only because those preservation camps, nature preservation camps, were less populated. This means less polluted by human beings. Well, of course, this puts a serious question to our religious traditions. We have always believed, at least in Abrahamic religions of Mesopotamian area, we have always believed that this world, this whole universe actually, is created to serve human beings. So human beings have been put in a position of prestigious, superior position. We do actually eat the meat of other animals. We do eat vegetables, which are live beings, and so on. So other life forms, and in fact, other inanimate objects are there only to serve human beings. So human beings are the essence of creation, and everything else is there to serve human beings. But the global climate crisis and the anecdotes of COVID-19 has taught us that we are actually a pollution on the earth. We are alien to this earth, at least with our newly earned modern and postmodern strategies of consumerism, with our new urge and zeal to waste the scarce resources of this earth, we have become an alien being to the nature. We are actually an unbearable burden on the earth. Well, this is a critical challenge to the very understanding of human being as the core and the final fruit of creation in the religious traditions, and in the scientific understanding of human being becoming unbearable load or burden on the wildlife and nature. We have to come with a creative solution where human beings are not going to be regarded as a burden on the nature. Well, for the time being, again, human beings are the only conscious beings who can weigh or who can discuss or engage in philosophical argumentations about whether we are aliens or we are natives in this world, whether we are a burden or the whole world is created for us, and so on. Since only human beings do discuss those issues, most probably we are not going to come out with a project to get rid of the human species. But what if the artificial intelligence, the robots, at some point in future realize that the robots pollute the earth far less than human beings? And what if the robots realize that They are challenged with extinction only because we are also consuming the resources of the earth. Already, certain environmentalist and vegan traditions have evolved into pseudo-religious movements. That is also a process usually encouraged and induced by the global climate crisis. Particularly, veganism has become an almost religious movement in the Western societies. Well, in India, veganism is as old as the Hindu religion, but it has never evolved into a radical movement. Whereas in the Western world, the police already in the United Kingdom, the British police has profiled certain environmentalist and vegan movement as possible terrorist organizations. You might know about Greenpeace, despite the two beautiful names, Green and Peace. Several members of Greenpeace has surpassed the red lines of peaceful activism. I'm not going to criticize environmentalists or vegans at all. At the age of 50, it is actually a creative idea to move away from meat and start eating, largely a vegetarian cuisine. So I'm not in a position to criticize that. I am suggesting that our religious traditions are going to face real challenges from these pseudo-religious movements that are emerging largely because of the global climate crisis. Why these are emerging? Because our religious traditions are not able to create a solution to the problem. The Operation Extinction, largely a British environmentalist movement, but with global outreach. The vegan movement, largely once again a British endeavor, but also with global outreach, have come to a point of challenging the established religious traditions. They do realize that the church or the mosque or the synagogue or other temples of religion are not offering a solution to the global climate crisis. This is true for all challenges to religions, but your religion, believers of a religion do not leave their religious camps only because, say, that religion cannot solve a simple catechism problem. For example, when I was living in Israel, there was this catechism. Catechism issues are daily rulings of religious traditions. Like in Islam, how should you prepare for prayer? What is cleanliness, and so on. These are all daily life issues, and religion certainly gives and orders your daily life. And these are called catechism in Catholic religion, and the word has been used for other religious traditions also. So daily running of religious life, the catechism has come to a challenge when in year 2003, an Israeli astronaut was sent to the sky. Chaim Ramon, the Israeli astronaut, was not a particularly religious person, but suddenly the rabbis in religious quarters of Jerusalem, grew an attention to the fact that he was a Jew, and even though he never cared about the Shabbat rules, the Saturday rules of Judaism, he should do. And the rabbi started discussing whether and how, if he wanted, Chaim Ramon would keep Shabbat in the sky. And also, of course, keep kashrut rules, the kosher rules. This is permissibility of eating things according to Judaism. Of course, we wouldn't expect NASA to send separate food for Chaim Ramon to the sky because he was Jewish. These are catechism issues. You know, in the end, the issue was a simple issue. When the space rockets reach to the orbit of the Earth, they start swirling around the world so fast. In fact, they make a full loop around the world in 90 minutes. This means a day becomes 90 minutes, meaning they see the sun set and sunrise every 90 minutes. So our 24 hours day diminishes into 90 minutes at the orbit of the Earth. This means every other 9 hours, there is going to be one Saturday, one Shabbat. And of course, for NASA, it would be unacceptable if Chaim Ramon would say every other 9 hours, well, it's a Shabbat now, I cannot work, despite the fact that I am in the International Space house and so on. It wouldn't work like that. Well, rabbis worked on this issue hours and hours. In the end, they couldn't find a solution. I remember only last year, it was before the COVID conditions started. Well, it is more than a year now. British football team, Liverpool, was playing an international game in Russia, but it was Ramadan. And the football star Mohamed Salah, Mo Salah, who was and still is the best player of Liverpool, normally fasts. He's a religious guy. And well, he didn't on that particular day because he was going to play a game and he needs to take in at least water and energy. And religious leaders back in Egypt made a huge fuss about it, whether you can quit fasting on Ramadan only because of a quote-unquote stupid game around a ball. And in the end, Liverpool couldn't win the game, and the imams in Egypt publicized a fatwa, a religious ruling, that it was only because Mo Salah didn't fast that Liverpool couldn't win the game. Well, you can just simply smile and to this stupidity and say, well, what on earth? This is not your topic, okay? And you cannot know why Liverpool won. Liverpool might have won without even having Mo Salah playing on that day. There are countless reasons why a particular football game ends in that particular result. And the fact that Mo Salah was fasting or would not be fasting would be only one of the reasons. In anyhow, these are catechism issues, and nobody will leave their religion. I have heard no Muslim person who said, enough is enough, I'm no longer a Muslim because of these stupid, rulings from Egyptian imams and so on. People wouldn't leave their religious traditions. But when it comes to an extinction issue like global climate crisis, which says you will die, people will look at their religious traditions and say, what now? What is your solution? And as a Muslim, my religion does not have the solution. Well, in fact, religious leaders of Islam in this modern or postmodern age does not care about this issue. I have not heard any group of religious, we don't have clerics in Islam, but religious leaders or imams or muftis come out and say, from now on, we do ban use of sera gases, ozone issues, and so on. No. In fact, Muslim jurisprudence cannot even ban cigarette in the last 200 years. So such a global crisis cannot be solved from within one particular religion. And as I said, when established religious traditions cannot propose a solution, the younger generations are going to look for new ways of, affirming their spirituality. So, new forms of environmentalist movements, veganism has reached to the level of pseudo-religious spirituality. They are no longer only dealing with global climate crisis, but they are proposing new life forms. Together with a majority of the environmentalists have become veganists, and a majority of vegans are looking for bioenergy issues and so on. They are looking for some kind of communication with the universe, denying any kind of existence of a supernature being, be it Allah or God or or the ancestors. So this is a form of denial of spiritualism for the sake of the body, and that is a real challenge for religions. Let me move to another topic, which might come more, fantastic to you and interesting to listen to. Artificial intelligence. In order to understand why I do believe religions are challenged with artificial intelligence, first of all, I have to underline not only religions, science, ethics, universities, businesses, human rights companies, human rights organizations are all challenged with artificial intelligence. Why? Because artificial intelligence means, and already means, not going to mean in the future, it already means agency without liability. I'm going to explain what this means. For the first time in history, and I'm not saying human history, for the first time in history of existence, in this earth, in this world, we do share agency with a non-human being. Every religious tradition, and by the way, every legal tradition, is based on one simple assumption, that human being is the only one and unique agent on this world. What does agency mean? Agency means to have the free will and to have the power. We were the only agency in this world with a potential to think and to decide and to act. Animals act, but without thinking. There's no consciousness there. It is largely impulses in their movements. So when an animal harms a human being or another animal, we don't punish them because we believe they are not liable. There's no culpability for animals. By the way, if a human being is not conscious, none of the religious or legal traditions regards a human being who has lost his consciousness as liable. For example, automaton. Automaton is a case if unwillingly and unwittingly a person loses the control of his muscles and during his uncontrolled movements harms somebody else. Like, for example, an epileptic seizure. During an epileptic seizure, the patient cannot control his movements, and if during those movements he unwillingly harms another person, kills somebody who's next to him, and so on, he is not liable for the crime. So culpability or liability is based on agency. Agency is the prime issue. In many religious traditions, particularly in Mesopotamian Abrahamic religious traditions, there is an age of liability. So in Islam, for example, boys and girls has to be at least 8, sometimes in some periods, in some parts of the world, this can go up to age 13 to become culpable, to become liable or responsible for the religious duties. So we don't expect a child at the age of 4 or 5 or 6 to start praying 5 times a day or to start fasting during Ramadan. And whenever they realize their, gender roles, that is the time their responsibility also starts. If, of course, they have a sound mind. Crazy people are not supposed to be liable because they don't have agency. So agency is not shared by all human beings, but it was until the coming of artificial intelligence, it was only a human uh, adjective. We wouldn't give agency to anybody or anything other than human being. Well, we already know that artificial intelligence has already come to a point that a robot, for example, a robot that drives a driverless car, gives its own decision and learns how to drive a car according to, of course, existing data, but learns and writes its own algorithm. Here I'm going to underline something. For those of you who are not coming from information technologies, many people think that algorithms are written by human beings. Many people think that every algorithm is written by human beings. It is true that still a majority of algorithms are either written by human beings or are controlled by human beings. But the trend is towards machine learning. And in machine learning, the machines, the artificial intelligence, is actually mimicking the human mind, and it is writing its own algorithm. The machine learning works on the understanding of giving a maximum number of data to the machine, to the robot, or to the computer, whereby the computer understands what to do. So instead of giving a computer, for example, an algorithm about driving, would be like this. If we wrote it, we would say, whenever you see the red light, you stop. Whenever you see the green, you drive. Okay? And that's a simple algorithm that actually we use also when we are driving a car. The traffic signs here and there are part of the algorithms that we use in our daily lives. At some point in our driving experience, we actually stop consciously thinking about issues, but the signs here and there on the sides of the roads induces mechanisms in our mind. These are algorithms in our minds. Well, when the algorithm is written by human beings, it's as simple as that. But when machine learning enters into the picture, we give millions of experiences of passing through the green light and millions of experiences of stopping at the red light, and the machine itself writes its own algorithm. We don't know how, we will never know how, but its own algorithm, and it stops at red light and it drives through when it is green. But we don't know what kind of an algorithm is written. It's most probably it's going to write an algorithm that says, I have seen 500 million cases where all cars are stopping on red light, so it's most probably the best of my interest to stop on the red light. But it's most probably is going to give a tiny percentage passing at red light also, because some of those driverless cars are going to be most probably police cars, and they are going to be ambulance cars also, so they will need to know when to pass at red light. In anyhow, algorithms are not 100% written by human beings. This means when an algorithm harms another human being, there is nobody to go and challenge. Okay? Like Uber, for example, is working for the last 10 years on an amazing project of creating the first driverless cars that have learned how to drive just by observing. When you become an Uber driver, you actually download an Uber app to your mobile phone, and that Uber phone uh, uploads data about your driving behaviors to a central server, and that data, valueless, invaluable data, that data is used by a supercomputer to create future driverless cars, which have learned from other human drivers. Yes, it is true, but we will never be able to pinpoint if that artificial intelligence driver makes a mistake. We will never be able to say this happened just because of this particular driver who made a mistake while driving, and because of him or her, our artificial intelligence learned this, wrong way of driving, and he is liable for this. No. Well, every religion and every legal tradition has based liability on agency. Now, artificial intelligence is going to have agency, but will it have liability? For example, think of an hypothetical situation which happens. Hypothetical situation of a driverless car driving at high speed, and suddenly the AI driver realizes that there are only two options. Either it is going to crash into the car in front of it, which has a baby on board, or it is going to crash into the bus stop where about 15 people, but no babies, are standing. Now, in the blink of an eye, the driver is going to give a decision. A human driver must probably decide to go into the bus stop. We don't know what the artificial intelligence driver is going to do. And yet, whatever the end result is, we will be able to punish the human driver, whatever the result is. Will the human beings who are, let us say, it went into the bus stop, also killed 5 people standing and harmed many people, injured many people. They opened cases against the driver. Well, there's no driver. There's only an artificial intelligence there. And will we be able to knock down the car? Well, in fact, the brain of the car is not in the brain. It is a supercomputer out there linked to the car from the sky. And we cannot shut it down because it actually controls millions of other cars. So we are entering into an era of agency without liability. This, of course, is going to give a lot of opportunities to, say, terrorist groups. Many people, I'm not going to say only terrorists, many people who want to kill somebody else, but are afraid of the punishment that will subsequently come on them, they arrange a child to do this. because they know children are not going to stay behind the bars. Well, in the case of children, no murder conviction is given. It is going to be manslaughter, and it is going to, well, the children is going to stay maximum 6 years behind the bars. So it is acceptable compared to life term. So, for example, in Eastern Turkey, where honor killings happen, it's always a child who kills, younger than 17 years old. That's because, according to our law, children between 8 and 17 has limited liability. Children under 8 does not have liability. We cannot just imprison a 7-year-old child because he did something bad. He stole or he killed. What about a robot killing? No, but not with an algorithm that is, written by somebody else. We always had this luxury of deciding that whoever encourages a crime is as if he or she did the crime also. But what if the artificial intelligence starts doing the crime on its own without any human intervention? Now, that's a real challenge. That's a real challenge to our legal systems that almost all legal systems in the West nowadays are trying to find a creative solution, how to cope with the issue and so on. In the European Union, already there had been several cases where the courts were perplexed when they did realize that there was nobody who wrote the algorithm. And in fact, there was nobody who would understand the algorithm. Now, the issue about machine learning is when human beings write an algorithm, we have a tendency to write the shortest possible and easiest possible algorithm to do a job because we have limited mental capacities. We don't want to, we don't want to use our mental capacities in each case to the maximum. We want simple solutions because we are tired. Okay. For example, we have created multiplication just in order not to add up the number of multipliers numbers. When we say 9 times 9, we don't add up 9 times 9. We already have the multiplication system just because it's easier and it doesn't harm our mind. It's not a burden. But when it comes to a computer, the computer can do it as however it wishes. So we know and we can actually read the algorithm that an artificial intelligence has created as part of a machine learning neural mimicking system. But then a simple line of algorithm that would be written by a man becomes hundreds of pages written by an artificial intelligence. We don't know why it does so, because it doesn't have scarce resources. It just simply works on to guarantee that it is going to give the same result. A classical saying among algorithm experts is when the algorithm is written by an artificial intelligence, we know what it does, but we don't know how it does that. Because it's impossible to read so much of algorithm. And it is impossible to control the logic of a machine learning artificial intelligence brain. Now, that is a challenge. But the challenge is going to become even more real when artificial intelligence becomes, a larger part of our lives. It's already out there. It's already there when you open your computer, when you want to buy something in Amazon, there is an artificial intelligence out there who decides, or which decides, whichever you prefer, who decides what you are going to see and so on, what kind of offers are going to be brought in front of you on your screen. There's an artificial intelligence there. almost at every level of your life, you deal with an artificial intelligence. In some cases, it is as simple as, an artificial intelligence that decides your login information or approves your login. Now, they are already in our lives. But what if they come to a point where artificial intelligence hacks human beings? Now, this term, hackability of human being, is developed by an Israeli historian, Yuval Harari. You might have heard and read Yuval Harari in Sapiens and in other books, but in his most recent 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Yuval Harari deals with the issue of artificial intelligence and big data, and he develops a term, hackability of human beings. What is hackability? According to Yuval Harari, when the computers know you better than you know yourself, you are hacked because your behaviors are modified by computers and you never realize that. In fact, those of you who have followed the presidential elections, the previous presidential election when Donald Trump was elected, those of you who have followed the ensuing Cambridge Analytica scandal, which is closed down actually by Facebook and a British company, and some people living out there in Eastern Europe, you would realize that some people, at least some people in the United States, voted for Donald Trump not because they would otherwise, but because they were bombarded by a series of Facebook posts that actually, little by little, convinced them to vote for Donald Trump. They didn't realize that they were actually targeted by a huge election rig project where they were personally selected because of their digital experiences, because of their openness to being controlled by digital artificial intelligence. It's not that Cambridge Analytica were giving fake news to them. They were not cheated. Their behavior, electoral behavior, was modified through a selective screening of news items. Cambridge Analytica knew that they were somewhere in between and they were looking for a direction, and it also knew that they were particularly interested in particular issues and in the unlimited supply of news item that will support both camps. It was left to Cambridge Analytica just to select the authentic news items, and occasionally some Facebook posts that were created in some remote village in Eastern European countries just to motivate those people to vote for Donald Trump. We don't know what was the level of involvement. Already in the United Kingdom about the Brexit referendum, there was an investigation, and the government agency who did the investigation suggested that there was certainly Russian involvement in trying to mobilize people to vote yes, meaning Brexit. But the agency claimed that involvement was not at a level of meaningfully changing the result of the referendum. In anyhow, a British agency does suggest that out there are state or non-state actors who are using artificial intelligence to modify our electoral behaviors. If they didn't do it enough to a level of enough to influence the result of an election, it is because the overall public already decided. But what if in the future they do it more, if they can do it already? And we know they can do it. Let me join this a little bit with big data. It's already not a industry secret that whenever you speak at your home in your own language about issues next to your mobile phone, it is closed. You are not speaking to somebody. It's just sitting next to you, or your Alexa or your Siri and so on. It is listening and coding your speeches and making a profile of your interests. The very next moment when you open your computer, you will be bombarded with advertisements about those issues. You can try that, you know. It's not that it will be done every time, because then it will give away its magic. But it does, you know. Today we are speaking about big data. Most probably when I close this presentation, I am going to receive a big data training advertisement from LinkedIn or Twitter or somewhere. So is it something bad? Well, it underlines that the classical distinction between public and private space is gone. All our religions and all our legal systems make a distinction between public and private space. Like, for example, it might be a crime to speak about the president of India, well, defamingly, denigrating him, suggesting that he is blah, blah, and blah, blah. Okay? It might be a crime. Well, certainly it is a crime in Turkey. But if you do it in the isolated singleness of your own bedroom, it's not a crime. No, you can just shout to the walls that Modi is such an abhorrible person, and so on. You can do that. Okay? Or you can do the opposite. As long as you are alone, you are not sharing that with somebody else, you are not doing it in public sphere and so on, but you are doing it next to your mobile phone, you are already in public sphere. Not for the time being. Nobody is going to come to you and say, you know, go to the prison for the time being. But believe me, if the things that you speak next to your next to your mobile phone amounts to racism, homophobia, and so on, in not so remote future, they are going to be accepted as legal evidence in front of courts. Particularly racist and homophobic comments done next to your mobile phone while you are speaking or while the mobile phone is closed are certainly going to be codified, and it is going to create a kind of profile about you. It's not going to say you, it's going to say this particular IP number and so on. So you can always say, well, it was not next to me, but it's going to use that information in order to target you when there's an election. It's in order to target you when there is an advertisement campaign and so on. Well, racist people also spend money. Homophobics also spend money. They buy certain type of videos, they buy certain types of books and so on. So they are going to be used in advertisement. Well, this is being hacked. And sometimes you do not realize that you have that inclination towards something, but your computer have realized that. There was a particularly interesting movement, and it was quite early in time. I think it was in 2004 or 2005. A US senator spoke at the Senate House criticizing Google, suggesting that his only computer at home was showing baby products, whereas there was no baby in the house. And said, what on earth is this? If there is a smart, computer behind this mind, why am I receiving baby product advertisements in the news whenever I open my computer? In the end, Google had to disclose information and suggested that the 16 years old daughter of the senator was actually pregnant, and she was getting prepared for a birth, and she was making searches about baby products. The senator had to apologize in the Senate to Google and said, apparently Google knows what's going on in my next door to my daughter better than me. Well, that is being hacked. And it was already back in 2003 or 2004. Obviously, this case was about, an information that was not disclosed to the father of the family for understandable but unacceptable reasons. But sometimes we do have secrets that we do not realize. We do have inclinations that we do not realize. We do, Zoom, back in last year in April, Zoom stopped eye movement tracking in Zoom meetings. I'm not sure whether you were aware that your eye movements were tracked before April, and it is going to turn back. Rest assured about it. It was stopped because it was highly a controversial issue. Zoom had done that, saying that this is going to help lecturers. Like, for example, I'm giving a lecture here, and if I am showing you something on the screen, or my face, my hand movements, and so on, Zoom was tracking your eye movements in order to give a kind of record about your level of interest. Yeah? So I will be able to say this and that person is listening or was listening with high level of interest, because whenever I moved my hand, her or his pupil also moved. And this was done by Zoom. And Zoom was sharing that information by private companies who realized that whenever a speaker mentioned a particular product, if the pupil grew, that means a particular interest. If I say Coca-Cola, and if your eyes were wide open, Zoom knew that you were possibly going to buy a cola. And that meant you needed to be bombarded by cola advertisement. Of course, there are competing Coke companies. They would love that information. And Zoom was selling that. But it stopped that in last year in April, but it is going to come back in several other creative ways. And sooner or later, we will realize that there is no use to just, resist, because they know it. If they do not look at your eye movements, next day they're going to say your mobile phone next to you is able to measure the body heat, okay? And body heat also gives away a lot of information about your feeling, your mood, emotions, and so on. Let us say somebody came up with a creative algorithm that joins the content of your speech or what you are listening to on YouTube or music and so on Spotify, and your body heat. And from there made a profile about things that you didn't even realize that you were inclined towards when you are going to get bombarded by information? Well, that information is a valuable information and you are already hacked. What can be done is not the topic of this presentation. I'm not going to show you ways of becoming unhackable or hacking yourself before being hacked by computers, but I have to say, in such a world, the public-private space distinction collapses. And that is a real challenge for religious traditions. It's a real challenge for religious tradition. Our religious traditions have almost all of them has a component of sincerity, and sincerity is usually measured consistency between public and private spaces. Okay? But we cannot do that. You know, we cannot measure and say, let me see what you are speaking about me in your bedroom. Okay. But think of a future that we can actually do that. That's the challenge. That big data and united with artificial intelligence is also a challenge for economy. And our religions do say a lot of things about economy. My religion, for example, has a system of yearly pits paying for the poor from our wealth and so on. It's a kind of religious taxation. Judaism does have the same thing. Christianity have lost it, but Christianity has church taxes and so on nowadays. Several other religious traditions does have some kind of taxation system, whether it is voluntary or involuntary, based on the wealth of the believer. And modern economies does have taxation system. Well, all taxation systems up until now was based on assets. Okay, when you have a house, you pay a tax. When you have a land, you have a land tax. When you have a property, a car, you pay annual property tax. These are concrete assets that you can see, show, and buy and sell. Well, the new economy is a data economy. Data is just simply, now we are creating data by way of speaking. Okay? And that data has a monetary equivalent. I don't know if anybody will pay anything to this presentation, but the data in it is valuable. As I said, if somebody has codified it by means of your eye movements, by means of your levels of interest, by means of my level of interest, and so on, that codified information is worth money. The point is, data can be produced from other data. Data can be produced, you might have heard the term data mining. It can be produced in-house. So for example, money cannot be produced from money in-house. So whenever you have money and put it in a bank or in any other scheme where you are going to earn extra money from that money, the system is out there to know that your money increased, and any increase is going to turn back to you as a taxation norm. But you can produce data at home. You can just simply film yourself. That is a data. You can just simply speak to your mobile phone. That is data. Of course, that's a very small data, and that usually is worth less than a penny. But there are some data that can be created at home without any official registration and so on, that can mean millions. Only very recently, Bitcoin sold a movie for hundreds of millions of dollars. only because it was recognized by artificial intelligence as unique. Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is an amazing world. It has its own rules and so on. I'm not going to enter into that, but we are living in a new economic era where you can increase your data without being detected, meaning without paying any tax. Well, that is precisely the war between the European Union and Google. And for the time being, European Union and Google seems to have reached to a certain level of settlement, but the court cases are going to continue on. Google is collecting data from European Union and selling it United States in United States, paying the tax in United States, and European Union says, what on earth? We are your data mining grounds. The harvesting is done here, but we are not seeing the text. Why I touch this issue? This has religious implications also. Like, for example, the zakat in Islam, the annual payment of 1/10 of your wealth. If you have a certain number of sheep in the mountainous village, those sheep are going to give birth to new sheep, and that means your zakat is going to increase. There are interesting counting mechanisms in Islam. It's not always a same ratio zakat on when it comes to sheep, for example. But the point is, when you do the same thing with big data, nobody will know. Even if somebody will know, it's not like, it's not like having sheep. But it does have real monetary equivalent. When you sell it, just like the sheep. When you buy it with real money, just like the sheep. It gives birth to new sheep, digital sheep, I mean. It is out there. People are getting rich on data, and yet, religiously speaking, our jurisprudential systems are not yet in a position to deal with this new economy. Largely, the modern or pre-modern modes of production was covered by our religious traditions. So we knew how much surplus value a laboring worker was producing, who should have been paying the zakat or the tax and so on. In the modern era, we performed well. In the postmodern era, we are perplexed. And I'm not going to say some religious traditions are in a better situation in that issue. Most probably we will need help or dialogue with secular institutions on those issues. So I'm going to speak about 4 more issues, but I'm going to speak only 20 minutes about a few more of the challenges and the kind of challenges that they are posing to religious cultural traditions. And then I'm going to ask this question. Will cooperation really bear fruits? What if a cooperation or a dialogue does not help also in front of those problems? Now, my next challenge, or our next challenge, is genome editing. You will remember the Chinese doctor who actually played with the DNAs of 2 babies of a family, parents who had HIV. Doctors had realized that a certain gene was responsible, or actually if that gene was suppressed, the next generation was not taking over HIV. When you look at the issue from that perspective, parents or couples who do have HIV willing to have a child which does not have HIV, will do everything to solve that problem. Ethical issues are raised on genome editing, and several experts all around the world were furious about the fact that this particular Chinese doctor did this. In fact, the doctor was dismissed from his position in China, but ask this question from a different perspective. Ask this question from a more global pandemic. Let us say, hopefully this won't be the case, but let us say that this COVID-19 virus continues on killing 500,000 people every year. We all are now sure that the virus is here to stay. We are now sure that the virus is here to stay, and whatever we do, including vaccination, we won't be able to fully annihilate the virus. We know that. Now, the issue is whether some doctors come up and say, if we suppress one of these genes in our DNA, the future generations will be immune to COVID-19 or any kind of infections, including Ebola, including SARS, and including other similar viruses. Will the humanity be able to say, no, we don't want that? Will we be able to say, we don't want that? If somebody comes out and says, we have detected a particular gene in human DNA that is responsible of aging. If we suppress that DNA, future generations are going to live 250 years and without getting older. Will the humanity be able to say, well, this is ethically unacceptable and so on? No, no. As a principle, if technology comes up with an innovative opening, initiative, it is never stopped. Everybody tries to control it, but it is never stopped altogether. Look at nuclear energy. You know, yes, there are attempts to control it. Nobody wants terrorist groups or non-state actors to acquire nuclear capability, which is actually a possible future challenge to humanity also. But nobody says, let us all together close down nuclear factories and let us stop and ban any kind of scientific work on nuclear science. No. So as a principle, if we are able to play with the genes, we will play with the genes. And as I said, bring together some of the challenges that are in front of us. Most probably our playing or editing of the genes or genomes are going to be in line with the challenges of humanity. If your challenge is global climate warming, meaning rising of the sea levels and having less food on Earth and less resources and places on lands, then you will certainly try fishman. Well, what's wrong with fishman? You know, it was some kind of fantastic imagination. I remember in 1980s or early 1990s, there was a movie, The Man from Atlantis. We all loved to watch, and we were amazed. And we, as a child, I was, some of us actually tried to imitate becoming the man from Atlantis, well, by way of trying to stay more time underwater. It didn't work, but what if it can work? What if we can manage to live underwater? Because our Earth is 70% covered with waters. And in fact, it is going to grow to some 80% if this global warming continues on. And instead of going to Mars to create a colony on Mars, which is still a challenge, why don't we create colonies underwater, which actually can produce more food than the lands if we get used to eating them? Now, this is only one way of future challenge to religious and cultural traditions. Well, if you are a Hindu, you are most probably knowledgeable about the spiritual cleansing act of Ganesh. Okay, but what if you are living underwater? Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all has spiritual cleansing with water. In fact, in Judaism and in Islam, it is several times a day. In Judaism, 3 times. In Islam, 5 times a day. Before the prayers, we are supposed to get what's called ablution. This is a spiritual cleansing with water. But what if you are living underwater? Well, enhance this possibilities of genome editing, and suddenly you will have an endless challenge to our established religious traditions. For example, we do have a fasting period, both in Islam, in Christianity, and in Judaism, in several Asian religions. Also, fasting is either ordained as a religious duty or is promoted, encouraged as a way of controlling spiritual evil, ordaining body and self of human being. And anyhow, fasting is a part of all religious traditions in the world. What if genome editing comes to a point and say, we're no longer eating, we are going to take food directly to our human body cells. And we are not going to use our, classical eating module. Will we be able to continue on fasting on occasions, or will fasting be a meaningful religious ritual? In fact, several people who are living on on receiving serum, they do not fast because they do not eat or drink anything. Well, the issue is, as I'm not an expert, and most probably nobody knows the full list of possibilities of genome editing or creating cyborgs, half edited genomes, half artificial intelligence human beings, and so on. The number of challenges is also a list of endless challenges. Now, the issue is all our religious traditions are there, particularly when it comes to the monopoly of solutions, are there to offer us or ordain on us, impose on us, control mechanisms of our spirits or of our bodies. If we can do away with our weaknesses or bodily material weaknesses by way of genome editing, why do we need religion? If religion is all about spiritual perfection, fasting is about that, spiritual cleansing is about that, all kinds of advices of religious traditions are all about control of bodily desire, the lust, the anger, and so on. But what if we have a possibility of controlling all those issues by simply editing genes? And what about the free will? Already in 2001, you will remember those years were the years of the publication of the first complete human genome. in year 2001, the issue of fate gene was raised, and several scientists, neuroscientists, claimed that gene scientists claimed that they have detected a fate gene, meaning some people were more inclined towards believing a superior being, be Allah or Buddha or whatever it is, a superior being than other people, genetically. So what if, some secular authoritarian regime decides to suppress that gene from future generations, or some lunatic religious regime decides to enhance that particular gene and guarantee that future generations are going to be homo fidelis, believing by birth. What about free will then? These are all challenges in front of our religious and cultural traditions that I believe no one particular religion is well equipped to deal with. I mentioned transhumanism as a future problem. Well, I can say transhumanism seems to be the remotest of those problems, but in fact, the transhumanists have been in circulation in the world much before the global warming, much before the big data, and so on. The issue is we do not find enough people who are willing to go do away with their bodies. Sorry. Under COVID-19 conditions, the kitchen became the studio and workspace, and my daughter is willing to watch a movie. Sorry for that. Now, the issue of transhumanism, if you are not aware about this issue, you should be. Transhumanists is a range of people. In principle, transhumanists believe, together with all other religious traditions, that a majority of our problems emanate from our material bodies. Transhumanists believe that the body is a burden of human beings. In fact, this is actually a common theme that you can find in many mystical traditions, that your body is actually the donkey and you have to ride it and it shouldn't ride you. The body, or any kind of desires, lust, will related to the body, is actually problematic, that needs to be controlled, ordered, and used with caution. So when religious traditions suggest you to eat less, speak less, control your sexual desire, and so on, then you realize that our religious traditions are, in fact, minimalist by means of our bodies. And transhumanists say, why stop there? They say, just get away, get out of the body. They say, if technology, secure technology, can be created to get our brains and the umbilical cord and anything that is essential for the life can be taken out of the body and put into a fluid where they will receive their food, and they will continue on living much longer, if not forever. Why bother with the human body? This body is getting old. It's broken. It is fragile by all means. It's not perfect. And let us get away. In fact, there are certain illnesses that you might see in 1 in a million, even less, people whom people have a sense of being stuck in their bodies. So in fact, the spirit and the body are not matching with each other, and the spirit is in constant search for getting out of the body. Well, usually those people commit suicide in the end, but before committing suicide, they try extremely, harmful methods to get to cut their limbs, their arms, their legs, and so on, so as to have a minimal of the body to continue on living. There had been several legal cases, both in the United Kingdom and United States. Those people wanted legal rights to cut their legs and cut their arms and so on. They all lost those cases, but then they tried this in their own homes. And there is no law that prevents harming one's self. You can just simply go and cut your arm. Nobody will be able to say anything to you in at least Western traditions. In religious traditions, this is not the case. But in anyhow, the transhumanism and the psychological illness I referred to are looking at the same place. The absolute control on the body. If I do have absolute control on the body, I can simply, recycle it. If I have an ability to live without the body, I prefer to live without the body, the transhumanists say. Well, the point is this: what will the brain uh, that is going to be left? Will it eat anything? Well, they say, the transhumanists say, everything is experienced within the brain. When we do eat anything, or when I drink the coffee, I feel the taste not in my tongue, but in my brain. So if I can actually arrange a kind of a mechanism where I'm going to hack my brain and I'm going to hack my body to make myself believe that I am drinking coffee, then I will be drinking coffee without consuming the scarce resources of the world. What is wrong in this? If I want to have rough sex, which is punishable in my religious tradition, but if I do it in my brain, I'm not harming anybody. It's only just fantasy in my brain. It's not punishable anymore. This means no space for religious traditions. Well, of course, no transhumanism supporter came out and say, I'm a religious Muslim or a very good Catholic, but I still do want to be transhumanist. But well, we will see them in the future also. Other challenges are going to make such extreme ideologies more thinkable. Think of the idea of, once again, I hope this won't be the case. Let us think that the COVID-19 continues 20 years. And every year, a new form of COVID comes out and kills more and more people. And in fact, people die suffering. Okay. At some point, some transhumanists will come out and say, these illnesses are all because we have this body, imperfect bodies. Let us get away. And already Elon Musk and other people are actually experimenting with ways of communicating with our brains. That is a challenge. It's a real challenge. And in fact, I don't see any religion to cope with such a challenge in the short run. Let me move to the issue of the political populism that is emanating from the right and the left. I was not expecting this meeting to continue this long. I arranged some meetings for 12 people are asking, is everything going fine? Let me stop my mobile phone. Now, the rising populism in the left and right are categorically different from the challenges that I mentioned up until now. You know, largely the challenges I mentioned up until now were technological challenges. You know, they are there because we are that much developed by means of our technologies. You would realize that those challenges are not emanating from illiteracy, are not emanating from wars and internal fightings. They are not emanating from ignorance. They are not emanating from poverty. They are in fact emanating from extreme richness. They are emanating from high technology and so on. So that is also very critically different from the problems that our religious traditions have managed to solve up until now. Our religious traditions here and there usually deal with problems that emanated from poverty, that emanated from ignorance. In fact, every religious tradition is an attempt towards getting rid of ignorance of people, ignorance of the self, ignorance of the other, ignorance of the earth, ignorance of the superior beings, and so on. So our religious traditions, cultural traditions, ideologies, and so on are largely based on the idea of the basic problems of the world. The basic problems of the world are always three: ignorance, illiteracy, whatever you call it, wars, fighting, enmity, and poverty. And every religious tradition has creatively found ways of dealing with those issues. There's no religion in the world, even if it had happened in the past, some this worldly religious cultic traditions emerged that advocated illiteracy, that advocated ignorance, that advocated poverty, and so on. No, even when poverty was seen with positive eyes, it was seen as a mechanism to deal with the problems related to poverty. In Sufi traditions, poverty is venerated only because it is a huge problem. And in order to cope with that problem, you have to understand that your poverty in this world, if you bear enough, if you subsist, if you manage not to revolt against God, against your faith, and so on, you will be rewarded in the hereafter or in the next life. Now, our religious traditions know how to solve problems emanating from poverty, strife, and ignorance. Well, these problems are emanating from absolutely different reasons: richness, wealth, extreme literacy, well advanced scientific innovations, and so on, and certainly peaceful lifestyles. So our religions are not well equipped to deal with those problems. Populism is particularly an issue. It has always been an issue. And in the historical versions of populism, populism was in the center. It was never in the extreme right or extreme left, because they were marginal positions, and populism is largely about appealing to a larger segment of the society. So it had to be in the center, not saying anything at all, actually just, promising. So we have seen in our different countries populist leaders emerging with populist promises about the next election, the lifestyle. When you promise a car to every single Indian family, you are a populist in the traditional sense. But the new populism is a marginal one, both in the left and in the right. And it is replacing organized religion. We have seen how in the United States, supporters of the previous president, I'm not saying President Trump himself was a extreme right radical, but there emerged a new American religion around the personality of President Donald Trump. Whether he himself was involved or not, leave it aside. It is electoral politics. He might have been sending messages to them and so on, but we have seen lunatics emerging, churches emerging here and there, believing that all leaders of the world, apart from Donald Trump, are actually Muslims. And in fact, the United States of America was on the verge of an Islamic conquest and so on. And people genuinely believed in this. And they believed that Donald Trump was some kind of a messianic figure to save Christianity from the invasion, the Muslim invasion. Well, nothing can be more remote than the actual reality in the world. In fact, in many Muslim countries, you will find millions of people who believe their leaders are not Muslim at all. And they might be correct on that. Well, I'm not speaking about religiosity by means of ID cards, but religiosity by means of religious sensitivities. Most of the leaders of the Muslim world are not sensitive Muslims or sensitive human beings, in fact. So the American radical right or the British radical right, who believed the European Union was going to have an economic and political crisis because of immigration, because of political, economic issues, and so on. So United Kingdom had to set apart itself from the continent. The people who voted for Brexit on the pretext that 70 million Turks were on the move coming towards United Kingdom, were going to take away all workforce from the British, the English, and so on. People voted on such beliefs. And this is a new kind of populism. And it is almost at the edge of becoming an organized religion. It's a pseudo-religion, or traditionally anthropologists called such religious movements as civic religions, like Kemalism in Turkey, for example. A secular or secularist religion emerged in the second half of the 20th century. So similar civic religions are emerging here and there in the left and in the right. If you go to South Sudan, you will find a left-wing radical populist movement. There's how killing people, turning the life of the people into a hell. But if you go to other parts of the world, like Brazil, for example, you will find a right-wing radical populism that is denying findings of science about COVID-19 or about global warming. Now, these are real issues that relate not only anybody in the streets, but also any person who has any kind of religious sensitivity or affiliation to a religious tradition. Well, the point is this: if your religious tradition cannot offer a solution to those problems, and those are the real problems of the world nowadays, then you will eventually start questioning your religious tradition. If your religious tradition does not say anything about global warming, it doesn't say anything about the ethics of artificial intelligence, or does not give you any clue how to deal with the challenges that artificial intelligence or big data or genome editing or transhumanism are posing to human existence in this world, then you will eventually start questioning your religious tradition. And that is a real challenge. Well, in the beginning of 20th century or late 19th century, there was a real challenge towards the religions of the world that emanated from socialism and communism, because socialism and communism recognized no religious traditions. In its purest form, Marxism regarded religion as the opium of human beings that needed to be do away with. And that challenge actually was not met properly by religious traditions. At that time, there had been calls in Turkey, for example, Said Nursi made some, unsuccessful calls to Christian missionaries, Sunni and Shiite groups to come together to support each other on the face of the rise of materialistic or naturalistic materialism that was largely coming from the Soviet Russia at that time. But it didn't help. Well, the communist system itself collapsed, but it was replaced by other challenges. Now, the issue is this. If we know that no particular religious tradition can cope with those problems on its own, do we also know that a kind of global dialogue, a cooperation, collaboration between religious groups or cultural groups can actually produce a solution? We are not sure about that. In fact, we have not enough data, historical data, about workability or efficiency of such a dialogue. We do have a few anecdotal historical experiences of points of contact or zones of contact between different civilizations. Like, for example, we can assuredly say all great civilization emerged at zones of contact of previous civilizations. When the Roman uh, when the Greek civilization met with the Egyptian civilization, it led way, opened way towards amazing Christian civilization in the 4th century. When in the previous ages, the Mongolian invasions actually brought several different civilizations together, merged them into each other. The Indian civilization, the Urdu civilization, was created under the Ilkhanids there. And in fact, some of the very first astronomy studies were done under the Ilkhanids. And some of the great leaders of Ilkhanids observed the benefits of such a dialogue to an extreme, and some of them actually advocated a unification of religions. Now we are totally aware of unworkability of such an option. So we, as religious people, would love to keep the monopoly of truth to our own religious tradition, but we can happily start believing that there is no monopoly of solutions to any religious tradition. There are some problems that have been solved or that can be solved, easily solved by other religious traditions. So the point of contact, zones of contact, have actually benefited human civilization. When under the Crusades, the great Islamic civilization and the barbarian European, well, I cannot call it civilization, at that period, came into closer contact. Out of the ashes of the Crusades rose the great enlightenment of the Europe. And this particularly happened in the zones of contact. So Andalus, now modern day Spain, was a particular zone of contact between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And in fact, all three religions benefited from the existence of others, provided that those contacts were made under peaceful dialogic conditions. So we have never seen such great sage of Judaism being produced in other parts of the world, but in Spain. Sadia Gaon or Maimonides are all students of Muslim teachers, and they had contacts with religious scholars from Islam and Christianity, particularly Maimonides, actually incorporated several Islamic tenets into Judaism. Those of you who are Muslim would know the Amentu of Islam. It was actually replicated by great Rabbi Maimonides into Judaism, and it is called Emunot today in Judaism. Half of the world Judaism is following the Sephardic way, which is the way of Maimonides. So half of the world is actually in
these kinds of connotations to polarize the people for their electoral gains. So how to overcome this clash among communities, among ethnicities, and between the countries also and people? So that's per se my first question.
Mushtaq, thank you very much. This is, well, actually, in America, they usually say this is a £1 million or $1 million question, but $1 million is nothing. Now, if we had the solution for $1 million, we would crowdfund that and solve the problem. No, even $1 billion is not going to solve that problem. Well, the point is this. Unfortunately, our religious traditions are hijacked. And this is not unique to Islam. You know, particularly in Baptist Christianity, there is an hijacked religion out there in the United States of America. In Latin America, you find Catholicism hijacked. In Africa, you find Protestantism hijacked by people who do things that any reasonable Protestant in Germany, for example, would be shocked to hear that their brethren are doing in South Sudan, for example. That is a Protestant Marxist movement out there, killing people as if it is a religious duty. Same can be said about the Philippines and so on. Now, the point is, we have to admit that the problems that are created in several hundred years cannot be solved in several years. These are lengthy problems. But I have to also underline that COVID-19 has taught us an amazing lesson. I think we have to work on that. Now, as I said, now it was a kind of enlightenment in my brain when I was listening to Eric. This is a Swedish diplomat from United Nations Wildlife Preservation Project. And he said, there is hope, because in the last 1 year, just because less human beings visited preservation nature camps in Africa, we now have more tigers and more lions that were almost extinct. So, well, it says that if we do not mingle with it, the nature has its own ways to solve the problems. And in fact, religions has their own ways to solve the problems. Human beings, as the humanity, has its own ways if we do not mingle with it. Now, the point is this. There is, Darul Harb, Darul Islam dichotomy has become such a paradoxical dichotomy that Muslims are actually migrating from their own countries, Darul Islam, to what they used to call Darul Harb, to European Union and United States. In fact, people are dying. They are risking their lives in order to move to Europe, which theologically speaking, from their own perspective, should have been evaded, but they are doing that. So we have to come to terms with the human reality. I do believe that challenges like COVID-19, like global warming, the first nation that is going to be erased from the face of the earth is going to be Maldives Islands. This is a Muslim nation, okay? Because of the average height of the island, when the water starts rising, that is going to be the first victim. That's a Muslim problem. Okay? That's a human problem, yes. That's a global issue, yes, but that is also a Muslim problem. Well, almost half of the mobilized populations of the world because of wars are Muslims, yes, but if global warming continues on as predicted, we will add a lot of several Muslim populations to those numbers. If desertification is going to be a problem as predicted, we Muslims are going to be the first to suffer from those issues because our lands are quite vulnerable to desertification and so on. So I believe the emergency of the problem is going to give to the next generation an opportunity to rethink their religious traditions. We will always have radicals out there who have the luxury of being heard more than what they deserve. And that is one particular problem in our mutual traditions. And when a radical goes out and blows himself up, killing some people, it's an individual act. Well, even if it is an organized act, it's an act of a very tiny minority of so-called Muslims, but suddenly it starts being representing the whole Muslim narrative in the Western media. The same is true when a radical, anti-Islamic militant here and there does a similar terrorist act. You will remember the Swedish case or several other similar attacks in the United States and so on, or in Australia, an attack on a mosque. Then suddenly that radical act is given the luxury of doubling their voice. This is a problem. This used to be a huge problem with conventional media. As a journalist, professional journalist, I have always fought with the idea of reporting only the bad news. There is this traditional communication faculty motto: bad news are good news. Okay, that understanding, that pejorative understanding of what deserves to be reported, and in its Arabic form, naba, to report, and nabi, the reporter, the prophet, are actually linked to each other. So whoever gives news should have been responsible. A prophetic response should have taken prophetic responsibility on their shoulders. But unfortunately, our journalism is pejorative. Pejorative means, report only bad news. But that has to change. Unfortunately, the social media followed the conventional media. Nowadays, also, whenever a fake news has a higher speed of spreading than the truth. We have to understand this is a difficult task. Establishing dialogue is difficult. Having our colleagues and brethren and sisters in our own religious camps to accept the idea of speaking, like for example in India, the idea of bringing Sikhs and Muslims and Hindus around one dialogue table is not going to be all acceptable to all partners of those religious groups. There's a history out there. There is a tradition of takfir and tadlil, meaning excommunication, in almost every religion. That is the issue of exclusivity issue. One particular issue that we need to work on is to make a distinction between monopoly on truth and monopoly on solutions. Make a distinction between Saadat Dar Akhirah and Saadat Dar Dunya, the happiness in the hereafter and the happiness in this world. We can continue on claiming superiority and truthfulness as it relates to the hereafter. And we can continue on say we are going to go to paradise only. Okay. And well, when it comes to individuals, I hope I am going to go to paradise. I have all kinds of fears about that. And we have to stop being the angels of hell and put people into the hell while we have no guarantee that we won't be put into hell in the hereafter. But we have to also come to terms with the idea that we can turn this world into a paradise. Our religious traditions are not only about the hereafter or about the next life, they are also about this life. You know, as a Hindu, you are not responsible only to spend a good life in this world only because you want to have a better standing in the next life, next turn, or next life, next reincarnation, but also because you have to make this life a beautiful life. And when it comes to turning this life into a paradise, logic imposes the idea that you have to collaborate. There's no way to exclude somebody from the paradise of this world. You know, we cannot just simply establish a hell in this world. Well, this is precisely what several Western developed countries did. They turned Africa, they turned the third world into the hell, and they closed their eyes to the realities of the continents that they actually usurped, that they actually left backward and impoverished. That is precisely creating a paradise and a hell in the world. But now we know that the hellfire, is contagious. You know, when you create a hell in Africa, it doesn't stay in Africa. It is contagious. Now we do have a fourth world in the developed first world. We have, you know, millions of people who are dying out of hunger or out of loneliness or out of destitution in the world. Last year in United Kingdom, we saw -7 degrees. Okay, -7. I lived in Ankara for some time in Turkey. -20 is normal. People do not die at -20. At -7, several people died, frozen. They were frozen to death in the United Kingdom in this modern age. Okay, why? Because of destitution. Statistics about COVID-19 deaths are not totally public right now, but in my country, in the United Kingdom, almost half of them are from elderly houses or from houses where an elderly people was living alone. That is a shame on humanity. People died alone, begging for help, but not knowing whom to call. That is a shame on humanity. And this suggests that the paradise that was created in the West, the first world is no longer a paradise. The hellfire actually is contagious. So if we are going to work once again, and in fact, there is an opportunity that China, India, several Asian countries are rising tigers of world economy, and if we can add some kind of ethical dimension to that growth, then we might actually find ourselves more equipped with strategies to create that paradise on earth. But it is not going to be easy. And maybe it is going to stay as a utopia altogether. But at least we will work for that. And it is certainly much better than, killing people and sending them to hell earlier. I don't know what kind of a logic is working out there. But the challenge is a huge challenge. There's no one solution to that. I do believe in person to person, individual to individual conviction, and I believe that every problem that emanates from human beings has the solution in human beings. It doesn't have solutions in systems. After the First World War, the world countries came together and created League of Nations in order to guarantee that no world war is going to be repeated. The Second World War happened. They said it wasn't working because United States was not a party to League of Nations. So they said, okay, let us create the United Nations, which was a kind of, tool of United States to control world politics. Well, it doesn't prevent a war. United Nations is useless when it comes to preventing poverty. When it comes to, I'm not saying it shouldn't have been created, but the point is this: when you do not solve the problem with human beings, systemic problems are not solving the issue. You can just pass new rules. There's European Convention on Human Rights. I'm studying, as Basat said, I am studying law, immigration law, human rights law. My country, both in England and United and Turkey, both countries are signatories to European Convention on Human Rights. They are both signatories to International Convention on Civil and Political Rights and so on. They both guarantee refuge, asylum rights to people, okay? And yet, when it comes to application, people die in Aegean Sea. People die in Mediterranean Sea when they were trying to pass to Europe. And in most of the cases, the poverty that they are escaping from, or the kind of dictatorship that they are escaping from, has been created by European powers. But people sign treaties, establish systems, but it doesn't solve the problem because in themselves, individuals has not solved the problem. I think prayer is a good way to start with. We have to pray for this world's paradise also. We have to ask, well, actually, Muslims, we have رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. Every day, 5 times a day, if we are reciting this prayer on tashahhud while we are sitting on our prayers, we say, oh, our Lord, give us a beauty, happiness, felicity in this world and in the hereafter. Not only in the hereafter, not only in this world, but in both of them. So that is a target of Islam, and I think every Muslim has a duty to work to establish such happiness in both worlds. Sorry for the lengthy answer, because this is the, as I said, this is one of the issues. But I have to underline the conflict of civilizations, clash of civilizations. These are no longer main issues in Western universities or Western intellectual circles. Artificial intelligence takes more funding. If you, for example, in the past, 10 years ago, you came to the United Kingdom and you are trying to establish a kind of research institute, and you are thinking, if you have limitless options, I would say go and establish something, anti-terrorism institution, because there is amazing funding out there. It's no longer the case. The case now is establish something on artificial intelligence, on genome editing, on global warming. There is amazing funding there. Why? Because West realized that clash of civilization is no longer the core problem of humanity. The core problem is is among the issues that I raised now. Unfortunately, many Muslims are still back in the 20th century's mindset. They think that still there is an issue of East-West divide. Well, there is. There is. First of all, there is injustice between East and West by means of distribution of wealth, distribution of technology, distribution of everything, distribution of human rights even. Yes, there is, but it is no longer the core discussion in the West. The core discussion has moved away from that. Those issues are already trivial issues. 10 years ago, as a Turkish intellectual, if you came and applied to a university here, they would say, oh, amazing, Turkey is a rising power. We need the Turkish academics, And now those departments are all closed down because people say, this is not the issue. The future has to deal with several other issues. As the Muslim world, as the Eastern world, we have to catch up with the realities, with the challenges of the new world. And I beg you to find a solution, because as I said in the beginning, I said I don't have the solution. These are largely uncharted territories, but it is good also. In business management, there is a term, blue ocean. Red ocean and blue ocean. Red ocean is where competition has reached to such levels that there is no chance that you will make profit because of the competition, prices went down, and the interest is minimal and so on. And there are sharks there because it's called red because sharks are eating others and blood and so on. So run towards the blue ocean, meaning oceans where there are no sharks, oceans there is less level of competition. And I believe if we start suddenly move the discussion or dialogue away from terrorism, away from historical injustices that are done to the Eastern societies during the Crusades or during the colonization and so on, but move to a rather different topic like artificial intelligence, like genome editing, and so on. If we suddenly start speaking about the future, where injustice is yet to be done, it's not yet done, but it will be done. Certainly, it will be done. If we don't say anything, we are going to suffer. They are going to create mobile phones, our data is going to be used, we are going to be just the market and so on, we are going to suffer. But instead of dealing with the sufferings of the past in the colonies and so on, I'm not saying forget about that, but if we move the dialogue towards future, we have better chances to come together and shape the future. I think I finished my time, yeah? Mushtaq, thank you very much for the question.
Thank you for a very enlightening long answer.
All right. So thank you. I don't know if anybody else had any question, but it is time now. We'll have to conclude this session here. Thank you, Dr. Kerim Balci, for this lecture on very important but least discussed topics.